News conference. Our guest this morning, Erik Wallin, a Republican candidate for Attorney General. Two-part question here. There's a bill pending in Congress that would, in essence, make all illegal immigrants, or give all illegal immigrants now in the United States a chance to become legal by paying a fine, taking some English language courses and some other criteria, and that they could stay here. So I want to know if you're in favor of that or not. But two, on the second part of the question is, locally, what do you think the role of local law enforcement should be toward illegal immigrants?
Sure. Well, I think the federal government does have the leadership role in terms of dealing with our immigration problem. Obviously, it's a federal issue. If there's a method by which individuals can become legal citizens here in the United States, then I think we should follow that, as opposed to just essentially turning our back on the issue and allowing the illegal immigration to continue in our country as well as in our state. Your second part of your question, I've never understood why we would treat the immigration law enforcement arm, ICE, any differently than we treat any other federal law enforcement agency. The Attorney General's office cooperates with federal agencies across the board, whether that's DEA, whether it's the Treasury Department, or the FBI. The fact that somehow we would change our perspective in terms of cooperating with immigration simply because it's the Immigration Service and it's a hot potatoes, so to speak, politically, I don't think is an appropriate approach. I believe that law enforcement should be cooperating across the board with those ICE, and quite frankly, I'm glad to see that the state police are doing that. We've seen cooperation agreements now with the ACI in order to notify ICE when they're discharging an individual who, in fact, is here illegally.
Why doesn't the Attorney General's office cooperate with ICE?
Well, it does. I mean, and I don't see any reason not to continue that, not to treat it any differently. I mean, some people talk about the fact that that there's a sanctuary city. But I, as a prosecutor, have in fact dealt with ICE on many occasions and work closely with them. So I'm not saying that it's not being done. I would continue to work with them.
Special Assistant U.S. Attorney Gerald Sullivan, as you know, got jammed up with a DUI charge and a breathalyzer. Do you think that there's been some criticism of how all that went down, and do you think he gamed the system, not illegally, but he gamed the system by pleading guilty to the lesser charge of refusing a breathalyzer test so he could get the more serious charge, the DUI, dropped?
In Rhode Island, I will tell you that is often the practice of cities and towns. One thing that...
Would you try to change that?
Well, I have some thoughts about perhaps whether or not the first refusal, in fact, should be a criminal offense, which would resolve that. But I can tell you that cities and towns across the state are responsible for the most part of prosecuting their own DUIs. It's not something that the Attorney General does unless it's by the state police or some other state agency that arrest comes through. And that, quite frankly, is a practice that goes on with city solicitors. So it is not an abnormal situation to occur. Some people have said, well, they've seen people actually plead to both. I can tell you, as a prosecutor, as a defense attorney, that pleading to the refusal the first time and then going forward and having the actual criminal DUI charge dismissed is not an uncommon practice.
How's your fundraising going?
It's developing. We've actually just opened a headquarters here in Warwick, so we've had the resources to do that. This is going to be this quarter as well as next quarter is going to be an important one, but we've had a good number of individuals stepping forward and contributing to the campaign, and now's the time when people are paying attention to this election to really go out there and raise the money that we need.
Do you think you can appeal to independents, and how will you do that?
Yeah, it's not a do you think you can, it's a must. You can't get elected simply with the Republican votes in this state. I'd like to think of the Attorney General's office as what should be the least political office in this state. It should have nothing to do with partisan politics. And my issues are not partisan in any sense. I mean, my focus is on public corruption, keeping our streets safe from gangs, as well as keeping our communities safe from child predators and sex offenders themselves. These work across the entire spectrum of political affiliations and individuals. So I'm going to work hard to attract independents as well as, quite frankly, Democrats.
Why do you bring up sexual predators? Is that a major problem at this point in the state?
It is. We have a major loophole in Rhode Island law that allows sex offenders to appeal their classification. When an individual is released from prison either having pled or been convicted of a sex offense, they get categorized as either 1, 2, or 3. 3 being the most serious sex offender in terms of the violence, the most likely to recidivate. In Rhode Island, there's a process by which that person can appeal their sex offender classification. During that appeal process, which can take up to a year, individuals in the community, if their level is one that requires individual notification, those individuals aren't notified while that appeal is pending. So you literally could have someone who's a Category 3, the most serious offender, most likely to reoffend, failed in, quote, rehabilitation, going into a community and living next door or down the street from anyone's family, their children, their wives, their grandchildren. And that's not right. And we have, there's a federal law that required that we close that loophole back in July. It was not complied with. Our Attorney General asked for another year extension. I think we need to take the lead on that and make sure we close that loophole to protect our children and our communities.
A couple of minutes left. I do want to get your opinion on the war on drugs. And as you know, drug trafficking hasn't gotten any less, for sure, yet billions of dollars, both nationally and locally, have been thrown at the drug problem. We have the HIDA task force, as you probably are well aware of it, that does a lot of great work in getting illegal drugs and busting the people, but they're still here and it's not going away. Do you think there needs to be a new approach into the illegal drug trade?
I think we
and if so, what is it?
Yeah, I think we need to just continue to fight the illegal drug trade that's going on, both in our cities as well as in our suburban areas. I do not. I am someone who believes that legalizing, for example, marijuana is not in the interest of the health or well-being of our state and of our children.
What about medical marijuana? Do you have any problem with that because it's been legalized here?
Yeah, it's been legalized here in Rhode Island, and quite frankly, as Attorney General, I'm going to enforce the law as it's passed by the legislature and signed by the governor. So I don't have a say in that. That's been taken out of my hands, and it is what it is. But it is my concern is that we're starting to move towards the legalization of marijuana.
Sort of like some might say a repeal of prohibition.
So to speak, yeah.
And that wasn't a good thing?
Well, I'm concerned about the fact that we may be down a slippery slope here, where it's, you know, a lot of, when we saw the medical marijuana pass, we saw individuals growing medical marijuana in their homes. A lot of those individuals were actually the target of crime. I'm not sure that we're going to resolve much by legalizing marijuana in and of itself to the entire community. There's still going to be a black market because they're talking about high taxes and prices on it.
We're out of time. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Our guest today, Erik Wallin, Republican candidate for Attorney General. For Bill Rappleye, I'm Jim Taricani. Thanks for watching this edition of 10 News Conference. Have a great Sunday.